Recently, I finished reading Starman for the first time, and this is one of the best comics I have ever read. It delivers on every promise that it makes, and every little detail matters. Like, you'll forget about it, and then it's brought back full circle, and just makes for amazing moments. The journey that Jack Knight goes on is also just amazing. It's beautiful, and he actually gets to change, and the book explores what it means to be a hero, becoming the person that you're always meant to be, family, and legacy. I read Starman in the compendium format, which collects more than just the main series. So I'll throw up on the screen what's collected. You can pause it to, read everything. But I'm going to look over some overarching things, and then I want to look at some specific issues from this book.
Starman is written by James Robinson, who does a phenomenal job. The main character is Jack Knight, and he's the son of Ted Knight, aka the original Starman. Jack's brother David was Starman before him for a short time, like a week or less than that. But when the Mist, a villain from Ted's Starman days, attacks, David is killed by the Mist's son. Now Jack Knight picks up the mantle and protects Opal City as Starman, but he does it in his own way. Nevertheless, Starman is more than just these three in the Knight family. One of them is McCall, an alien who stopped his people from invading Earth and ended up living in Opal City and protecting the city for a time. The full list of Starman or Starmen includes Ted Knight, Doris Lee, just for a day, McCall Thomas, David Knight, Jack Knight, the Starman of 1951, aka Charles McKnighter, and David Knight for some time, Prince Gavin / Will Payton, Thom Callor, aka Starboy, aka Danny Blaine in the future. Then there's Ferris Knight from the real far future in his Starman 1 Million. And at the end of the book, Courtney Whitmore takes on the mantle as Jack passes on the cosmic rod and she becomes Stargirl. Honorable mention, though, to Sylvester Pemberton, aka the Star Spangled Kid, and then he was known as Skyman as an adult. I love how all these characters are present and matter because legacy is a huge theme in this book. Each one of these characters' time as Starman, whether it's a day or not, is super important. There's so much history, and it makes the mantle of Starman just feel more real. It makes Opal City feel more real with this history. The Odairs are a family that helped protect Opal City by being cops ever since their father, Billy Odair, was a cop. But also, they've been assisting Starman ever since their father, as I said, Billy Odair, was saved by Ted, and that began a close working relationship between the Odairs and Starman. The Odairs in the present day consist of Clarence Odair, who is the oldest and highest ranking. Mason Odair is the quiet one and insanely good as a cop. He's very acrobatic. It's insane. Hope Odair is the youngest, and she's suspicious of the Shade, but does come around and even enters a relationship with him. Barry Odair betrays the family by working with the Shade's nemesis Culp, and Matt Odair, who was a corrupt cop, but eventually turns it around and finds out that he's a reincarnated soul of this sheriff from the old days of Opal named Brian Savage, who is also a good friend of the Shade, and when he's Matt Odair, he's also a really great friend to the Shade. The Odairs build on that theme of legacy, which I really enjoy, but also build on the theme of family, and not just the Odairs, but through the relationship with Jack, Ted, and McCall. Family is more than just the people who share your own name and blood. I really love issue 27, the Christmas issue, because it just shows how these characters are so close together, but also when they're celebrating Christmas, Jack is late, and he ends up bringing back a guy that he was helping throughout the whole issue who was dressed as Santa named Pete, and they just welcome him on in, treating him like family. It's just such a heartwarming moment. Sadie is the love interest for Jack, and it's revealed that she's the sister of Will Payton. I actually really like that reveal because it makes for such an interesting dynamic in her and Jack's relationship, but they ultimately both love each other despite the fact that Sadie originally just wanted to get Jack to look for her brother in space. She actually finds herself caring for him, which I really like the relationship.
It's hard to not fall in love with all of the characters in this book, from Jack, Ted, David, the Odairs, McCall, but I think the perfect example of this is the Shade. He's someone who's been alive for 200 years, and he's not quite a hero, not quite a villain. You would call him an anti-hero, but when I think of that, I think of like Deadpool and like the Shade. I feel like, I don't know, it just feels like he's something different. He exists in this gray area, and he teeters the line of hero and villain very well, but you can tell that he cares for Opal City so much, and you can't hate him. You love him just so much. He's such a fascinating character, and I love the way we see his like immortality play out, because he becomes less human as he gets, as time goes on, because he cut himself off from his family. He didn't want to see them get older and him not age, and then he eventually cuts himself off from just like kind of people in general, because he doesn't want to see them die, and he just becomes less human. But as the book goes on, he opens himself up to just people and he becomes more human again. You can tell that James Robinson loves the character of the Shade so much. I love the elegance that he has, the way he speaks, moves, and all the actions he does. It's just so great. It's hard not to love the Shade. Speaking of the Shade, this is the perfect time to get into his 2 miniseries. The first one is from 1997 and it's the Shade 1 through 4. The second is from 2011 to 2012 and it's the Shade 1 through 12. The first miniseries is phenomenal. It's very intriguing learning some of the history of the Shade, and I love his interaction with Jay Garrick. It's great. But my favorite part of this is the Shade's feud with the Ludlows. So a group of like Ludlows are like a family that like found the Shade after he got his powers, after he lost some of his memory, and they tried to kill him. And in retaliation, he kills them, and so the remaining Ludlows get really mad at the Shade, and they train their kids to attack and go kill the Shade. So every couple of years, he's gonna have a Ludlow attack him, and it's a very fun idea. But it also leads to a really great emotional climax at the end with one of the remaining Ludlows in the Shade and just ending that whole cycle. It's great. I love this miniseries. So the first one is phenomenal. I'm honestly just gonna say 10 out of 10. It fits very perfectly into the world of Starman. The second miniseries isn't bad at all. I still very much liked it, but it's just not as good as the first one. The placement of it is after Starman actually ends. I mean, it released after that, of course, and takes place after that. But it's just so weird going from Starman ending to the Blackest Night tie-in to the Starman Congorillo team up and to the Shade. It's a little bit jarring just from the finality of Starman ending. Anyways, the second miniseries is still good. I really like the Shade's relationship with Lassangra, which is basically his daughter, who's also immortal, his original family, and Odair. They're all just very interesting dynamics in how they connect to the Shade. But one thing I'm still confused on is Dreamtime. I'm honestly not 100% sure what it is. It's like a alternate dimension or realm or something that people can access. I'm honestly not too sure what it was. But also another like kind of crazy thing that I didn't understand is the whole Egyptian god things being like not gods, they're like beings sent to chronicle and keep track of Earth or something like that, whatever. I don't know. It wasn't bad, but it was just kind of crazy to think that the Shade is interacting with these like beings on this level of power. It was just a little odd. However, I really loved the ending of the second miniseries. It ended with the question that the Shade would never answer, how he became this way, how he became the Shade. So finally answering it at the end, I think, is great, and it showcases how he's changing, how he's, opening up. He's gonna, feel feelings again. He's gonna reconnect with his humanity and humanity in general. I really love the ending. Tony Harris's art is amazing. It's so beautiful to look at. So when he's no longer the main artist on the book, it is a bit of a shame, but like he creates such a distinct look for Opal City and the book. So when the next main artist shows up, Peter Snijdberg, I'm not sure I pronounce it, but when that guy is like the main artist, it does a great job too, because like it's a continuation of what Harris is doing, but it feels like, there's a bit of its own unique style in there, and both of those artists are really great in this book. I also love the way that the book uses different artists for flashback issues or moments, because it brings a lot of style to those flashbacks. It makes them pop out more, stand out, just makes them unique to, modern day Opal City. Like there's these different looks that each flashback has, so it just makes it more special, and it feels like there's a unique lens that we kind of have to view each flashback through that's not the same as when we're looking at, modern day Opal City. Opal City just feels so real. It feels like a real city with real history to it, and there's just that weight that makes it feel so real. And I think it comes from just the way that it kind of feels like a character in its own right with all this history, and we know so much about it and how we've seen it change. It just feels like, yeah, it's more than just a setting. It's like it's Jack's home. So when Jack he returns from space at the end of issue 60, I just feel his happiness. And then in issue 61, when he just got back and he gets interrupted, he has to go deal with everything that's been happening since he was gone. I just feel his frustration too, because he just wants to, be home after being in space for so long. It's great. James Robinson and all the artists just did an amazing job at bringing Opal City to life, making it feel real. And I don't want to forget, like, when I mean artists, like I'm thinking about the colorists, the inkers, like everyone who worked on this book just did such an amazing job at bringing Opal to life. I mentioned them at the start of the video, but the themes of Starman are what it means to be a hero, becoming the person you are meant to be, family and legacy. There's a lot more themes you can add, of course, but these are kind of the ones that come to the forefront of my mind. The book does an incredible job at handling these themes through Jack's journey as Starman. Like, at the start of the book, he denies his legacy, denies his destiny, denies his family. He's denying, everything that Starman is. And he's just an overall more bitter person, as we see at the start of the book, but in some of the flashbacks in Stars and Stripes, number 0. But when his brother dies, Jack steps up to Starman. He steps up to the mantle, to the legacy of it, after he has denied it for so long. And he realizes that he was the one who, wanted to be Starman. He wanted to be like their father, but he just kept denying it. And he finally, when he steps up, he does it in his own way. He doesn't do it like his father did. He doesn't do it like his brother did. And Jack isn't a perfect person either. He has his own struggles. He overcomes them, though, and he becomes not a perfect person, but a better person. And he earns his right as Starman in the legacy of it. So at the end, when he gives up, he says, "I've done all that I can do. I'm not into it anymore. I have a family. I want to do all that." He earned that right too, because he is a hero. He did so much to protect others. So now, he gets to live out his own life and have a family. The book is also very emotional, and I think the saddest part is when Jack's father, Ted, sacrifices himself for Opal one last time. He had gotten cancer from fighting Dr. Phosphorus, and he decides that, if I'm going out one last time, saving my city. Ted's sacrifice is a heartbreaking moment, especially at the end when Jack realizes that he never got to say I love you to his father. It's super emotional, super sad, but this is amplified by the next issue, issue 73, where Sadie leaves Jack because she can't live with the superheroics anymore, the risk that they bring, but also from all the other superheroes giving their speeches at Ted's funeral. It's so sad. Ted went out like a champ, saving his city for the last time, and even had the class to shake the Mist's hand as they get blown up. He's just the epitome of a great guy. And that final moment right before he sacrifices himself, when he's talking to Jack, he says, "When you tell your boy about me, please lie a bit to make me sound cool." And then Jack says, "I won't have to lie." It's just such a bitter, sweet moment, and it's hard to just not get emotional over his sacrifice. As I said, every little detail matters. It's so tight-knit, and one of those details is that in issue 2, it's revealed that the Black Knight was the one helping Jack on the roof. I had completely forgotten about that moment that Jack saw someone helping him and couldn't see who it was. That was great. That was just insane. I was like, oh wow, I can't believe James Robinson planned that far in advance. And another one of those moments is towards the end of the book. It's revealed that there's a guy within the Shade, his nemesis, named Culp. And at the beginning of towards the beginning of the book, Jack was talking to the Shade, and he says like, "Oh," or they're talking about some book, and the Shade gets the book name wrong, and Jack was like, "Huh, that's weird that the Shade got that wrong," and he doesn't think about it again. And then at the end, when Culp was like, "Oh hey, that was me who got that book name wrong," and it's just such great small little moment of foreshadowing, and it just makes for an insane reveal like that. It's just so crazy how far in advance James Robinson really had this story figured out from the start. I also said this at the beginning of the video, but the book delivers on every promise that it makes. Jack, he goes to a circus, he goes to space, he sees his son, there's a burial, and so many other things, though I am blanking on one of those one of the future things he learned from Charity was there's a winged man that comes to Opal City, and Ted knows him but also doesn't. The only winged man I can think of is Black Condor, but I don't remember him having that much of a connection to Ted. I could be blanking though, but I don't remember that. Anyways, everything in this book matters. It all exists for a reason. It serves the story, and that kind of leads into my next point. One of my favorite parts of this book is just how self-contained it is. Yes, it exists within the larger DC universe, but as I just said, every character, every little thing that shows up, it all serves Starman's story, serves Jack Knight's story, and I think it's the perfect example of a story occupying its own space within the DC universe, but also being part of that wider universe. One of the promises that this book makes very early on is that every year Jack is going to meet with his dead brother David, and they're just going to talk. It leads to many great emotional moments, and I love when James Robinson, he diverts expectations for 2 of those years by having David meet with McCall. The most notable aspect in each of these talking with Davids is that David himself is always in color, but Jack is in black and white. And I want to talk about, what does that mean? Why the distinction? And I want to start with the first one, Starman number 5, Talking with David, 95. In this issue, Jack and David fight like siblings do, but they also get to talking about the relationship, how they viewed each other, and they're just bonding, which is something they probably didn't get to do a lot of when David was living. And David explains that he always envied Jack. He always envied his brother because he was his own man, and that David was always just trying to live up to their father, to be like their father, to be like Starman instead of being his own man. I think that the obvious reading for the color versus black and white is that it's the distinction between dead and alive, and I think that holds true for the most part, but I think there are other meanings you can make from the color, which I'll get into in a second. But here in this issue, I think it represents David in death. He's able to, become his own person. He found himself, and that's because towards the end of the book, it's revealed that the Starman of 1951, at least for some time, was a time displaced to David. And in the final Talking with David, it's revealed that Kent Nelson, aka Dr. Fate, was able to use some of his residual magic. That is what allowed David to meet with Jack and McCall over the years. And he was able to use that magic to time displace David to live out some time as the Starman of 1951, give him more time to live. And that's why David is in color, because his death allowed him to find himself. That's why he's in color and Jack isn't, because Jack, he already, kind of is himself. He found that in life, not in death. So that's my thinking on why David is in color here, but Jack isn't. Another thing that the color represents is heroism. David was able to find his heroism as the Starman of 1951. Jack told him that, told him his fate. He was going to die, but David still went ahead. He was scared. He knew his fate, but he still chose to help people. However, in Starman number 37, which is Talking with David 97, there's a bunch of other heroes there, and David's the only one in color. None of the rest are. So why is that? My reading was that the reason David is in color, because like Jack, he kind of only views himself as Starman. It's his connection to heroism. He doesn't really see himself as this like part of the big thing of superheroes. So then at the end of the issue, after all the characters, tell their story, and Red B, he says, let's give a toast to Jack. He says, and by fighting the fight, by living the life, may he honor us all. And everything is in color now. And I think this represents that Jack, he himself now, he sees that he's accepted by the wider superhero community. He's more than just Starman. He's something greater. He's a full-fledged hero if he didn't recognize it before. He brings peace and hope to people, to Opal City. And so when that barrier of black and white and color gets broken, it's because he's part of something larger. He's part of a legacy, not just of Starman, but of just superheroes in general. Despite all the other heroes being in black and white, their heroism is also represented in these like little flashback parts where they tell their story, and that's in color. That represents their heroism and how it's, for now, separate from Jack until the end. But why is Jack in black and white? I touched on it a little bit. I think it's because, he's not dead yet. He still has a life to live, a story to tell, super heroics to, do. But if anyone else has any other readings on the black and white versus color in these issues, I'd love to hear them, because I think there's so many things that it can mean. One more thing I want to add with the Talking with David's is the final one, when Jack is with his brother David and their father Ted, and they're looking at, past adventures of Ted. And I like that moment because like you can see that on the back of Ted and David, they have stars, but Jack doesn't. I think that represents, Jack, he's being Starman in his own way, of course, as he has, but also that, he's not dead yet. He's still life to live, and it kind of, it connects to that black and white. What I talked about is like, he still has a story to tell. He still has a life to live, but it also represents that he does things his own way. Jack is Starman despite not wearing the star on his back.
Honestly, I really don't have much criticisms. Starman is a perfect example of a superhero story that actually ends and allows the characters to change as it goes on. It doesn't overstay its welcome, and James Robinson knows what the story is, and as I've said, it tells a very tight-knit story where everything matters and it delivers on every promise. However, I do think that the book could have leaned more into Jack's emotions after being sexually assaulted by the new Mist, which is the OG Mist's daughter. The book focuses on the effect that his son being raised by the Mist will, this son's going to learn to hate him, which is an interesting dynamic, but I do wish it dove a little deeper into the act itself, not just the outcome with his son. This isn't a huge complaint by any means. Like, it doesn't leave a sour taste in my mouth. I just think that this is one area that could have used some expansion. There are parallels to this comic that can be made with Invincible because, both are superhero stories that have a definitive ending and that allow the characters to change. But I do think that Invincible handled Mark getting sexually assaulted better than Starman.
There is a lot I can say about Starman. I could really talk about this book forever, but this video is going to be who knows how long. So for the sake of time, I'm going to end it here. I absolutely adore this book, and I would recommend it to anyone who likes superheroes, or just to anyone, because it's a masterclass in storytelling, in superheroes, and in comics. The journey that Jack Knight goes through is just beautiful, and all the characters feel so real. Opal City feels so real. However, I still do have some of Jack Knight's journey. He's right here on the cover of a JSA Compendium Volume 1, so I still have more Jack Knight to get to. But whoever made it this far, thank you for watching. If you could comment your thoughts about Starman in this video, it's all greatly appreciated. And if you like what I'm doing, if you can subscribe too, because that also really helps. But as I said, if you made it this far, thank you for watching.